Crying when you're happy feels wrong. I mean, think about it. You're showing sadness when you're not sad. So why do we do it? Well, the common answer is that crying is an emotional response, and you are emotional when you're really happy. So, job done, right? But think about this for a second, because what's the first thing someone says when they cry out of happiness? Well, they say, "Don't worry, I'm not sad, I'm happy." So if we're so advanced, and we know in our heads that this is a display of negative emotion, why does our body do it anyway? Surely the better solution would just be to smile. Well, it does make sense, and I'll explain it in these 3 distinctly different topics. But to sum it up in one sentence, counterintuitively, the body doesn't understand what the brain is telling it. I'm Lewis, I learn things for a living, and every study that I use will be in the description. First of all, what are tears, biologically? Well, they're a defense mechanism. Just like the snot in your nose stops viruses flowing up through the air into your body, tears protect your eyes. It's just like when you're chopping onions, that's why you cry. But there's no physical threat when you're happy to justify tears. So there has to be another reason for them to exist. Emotional tears are very different. They're tied to our limbic system, which is the emotional center of the brain. And they normally show up when you're overwhelmed. And overwhelmed is the important word here, because your brain, unlike you, doesn't split good and bad emotions the way that you think it does. Think of it like a volume slider on your phone. Your brain only knows what the volume is set at. 1 not being emotional at all, and 100 being emotional to the max. Now imagine the type of sound like the type of emotion. For instance, for this example, we'll say the bass notes, like the bass guitar and the kick drum, they are the sad emotions. But the treble notes, like the high vocals and the high electric guitar, the top string, they are the happy emotions. You could be at a 13 in volume, so not that high at all, not very emotional. But you don't know if that emotion, the 13 that's there, is made up of just bass or bass and treble. The same goes for if you're at 100, if you are extremely emotional. The brain can't tell whether it's all bass or all treble, or it could be a mix of both. It doesn't really matter what it is, because regardless of the emotion, you are still overwhelmed by the max volume. And when it gets to that point where your brain is that overloaded, tears become a sense of a release valve, a way to physically get the feeling of overwhelmingness out of your head and into the world. But why choose crying? I mean, of all the ways to physically express yourself when you're happy, why would you choose the negative one? Why not choose laughter or goosebumps or quite literally anything less embarrassing? Psychologists call this the dimorphous expression. This is when your body uses an opposite emotion than what logically makes sense. Like crying when you're happy, or even laughing when you're nervous or when you're sad, like at a funeral. It's your body's way of restoring balance. Dimorphous literally means 2 forms, and the reason your brain does this is so fascinating. Imagine that you're at a comedy show, and the comedian tells a joke, as the comedian should do at a comedy show, and then everyone in that room erupts in laughter. I mean, hysterical. People are crying out of laughter. The collective action of everyone laughing in that room, I'm sure you'll agree, makes the joke seem funnier. Now imagine for a second, instead of everyone laughing, if after the joke, everyone just started crying. And not the happy kind of crying, I mean like bawling their eyes out. Physical responses to emotions, as well as one being a way to stop your body being overwhelmed by said emotion, can also, counterintuitively, amplify said emotion. Think about a time that you felt sad. So you've put on some sad music and you've ended up at the end crying to said music. In that time, while you were there crying to the music, you probably, definitely, categorically felt worse than you did when you weren't crying. Yes, that crying has then led to you getting that emotion out and feeling better about it afterwards, but I mean, in that moment, you felt worse about whatever it is you were thinking about. The brain knows that this happens. It's just a way that we're hardwired. So obviously, if the volume, let's say, is at 95, you are almost at your absolute peak, the last thing the brain wants to do is raise it to 100. It needs to get it down fast, so it needs to express a physical emotion, but it can't risk raising it to 100. So what does the brain choose to do? It chooses to express the opposite of what you should. For example, nervous laughter. You're already feeling sad, so it cuts through this tension by lighting up parts of the brain that are linked with play and with happiness, because that's what you normally do when you're laughing. If you're to cry when you're happy, it's your brain lighting up the opposite end of the spectrum compared to what you're actually feeling. It's your way of your body restoring balance. And then there's the social side, which in my opinion is the most important part. It's about human connection. Because think about it for a second. If you see someone cry in a happy situation, you immediately know how much this situation actually means to the person. It deepens the bond between you two. Emotional tears are distinctly unique to humans. No other species on the planet cry because of something they feel. It's all for them a physical response to protect themselves, just like how we cry when chopping onions. And one theory surrounding why this came about is that it formed as a sort of social glue. They signal vulnerability and authenticity, as well as a very deep connection. So think of emotional tears as a way to establish something to a group. You're saying that this is really important to me. This is real, and you are important to me. Emotions are extremely powerful conveyors, and I think as a society they've become quite taboo, as in we don't really like to speak about them. Or at least I didn't like speaking about them, really, until about a month ago. When in reality, if we do speak about them, we learn more about ourselves and, more importantly, about other people than any other way you possibly could surmise on the entire planet. It brings people closer together, and it brings you closer to yourself. So don't ignore your emotions, listen to them. This brings up a bigger question though, because if the brain can't distinguish between joy and sadness, then what other emotions can it not distinguish between? How many other emotions do we think are distinct that are actually just two sides of the same coin? I mean, is there such a thing as different emotions? Or are they all just different flavors of one singular emotion? I'm gonna make a video about this, and when I do, it'll be on the screen up there. But until then, it's a video about why you can't punch in your dreams, why it feels like you're moving through sludge, just because it's really, really fascinating to me. So, cheers, bye.